In 1929, a dusty map fragment surfaced in Istanbul that would terrify historians for the next century. The PIRI REIS map showed Antarctica's coastline in impossible detail, drawn in 1513, 3 centuries before the continent was discovered, and depicting land features hidden beneath miles of ice that we only confirmed with ground-penetrating radar in the 1950s. But here's what they don't tell you. This wasn't an isolated anomaly. Hidden in archives worldwide are dozens of ancient maps showing impossible knowledge, accurate longitude calculations that weren't invented for another 200 years, detailed coastlines of lands that didn't exist, and mathematical precision that rivals satellite imagery. Tonight, we're following the paper trail that powerful institutions have spent a century trying to bury. Because these maps don't just challenge our timeline of discovery, they prove our ancestors knew secrets that would shatter everything we've been taught about human history. The weight of Professor Charles Hapgood's trembling hands betrayed nothing of the earthquake about to shake the academic world. It was 1956, and the respected geologist sat hunched over his desk at Keene State College, staring at photographic reproductions that shouldn't exist. Before him lay copies of a map fragment that had been gathering dust in Constantinople's Topkapi Palace for over 4 centuries. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about the history of human knowledge. The chart bore the signature of PIRI REIS, an Ottoman admiral whose reputation for precision had earned him a place among the greatest navigators of the 16th century. Yet this particular work suggested something far more extraordinary than skilled seamanship. The coastline etched across the ancient parchment matched the northern edge of Antarctica with startling accuracy. A continent that wouldn't be officially sighted until 1820, and whose true shoreline remained hidden beneath ice sheets averaging over a mile thick. Hapgood's trained eye caught details that made his pulse quicken. The map didn't just show Antarctica's general location, it revealed geographical features that modern expeditions had only recently confirmed using sophisticated ground-penetrating technology. Bays, inlets, and coastal formations appeared exactly where satellite surveys would later find them, buried beneath ice that had accumulated over thousands of years. According to everything science understood about glacial formation, these features had been invisible to human eyes since before the rise of recorded civilization. The admiral's own notes, inscribed in Ottoman Turkish around the map's margins, offered tantalizing clues about his sources. PIRI REIS claimed he had compiled this chart from older maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, others allegedly captured from Christopher Columbus himself. The navigator wrote with the confidence of someone working from established geographical knowledge, not making wild guesses about unknown territories. But if ancient cartographers had accurately mapped Antarctica's ice-free coastline, when had they done so? And how had they possessed the technological capability to survey and chart a continent that lay thousands of miles from any known ancient civilization? The implications sent chills through academic circles that had nothing to do with Antarctic ice. Hapgood's discovery ignited a firestorm of controversy that academic institutions seemed strangely eager to extinguish. Peer review processes that typically took months stretched into years. Funding for related research dried up with suspicious speed. Colleagues who had previously supported Hapgood's work began distancing themselves, citing concerns about academic credibility and proper scientific methodology. The Smithsonian Institution, which had initially expressed interest in examining the document, suddenly reversed course. Internal memos, later leaked by a disgruntled employee, revealed institutional pressure to avoid legitimizing fringe theories and maintain Appropriate historical narratives. Similar patterns emerged at universities across America and Europe, where researchers found their access to relevant historical documents mysteriously restricted. What made the scholarly resistance particularly puzzling was the map's undeniable authenticity. Turkish archivists had verified its age through multiple independent analyses. The ink composition, parchment materials, and binding techniques all confirmed its 16th century origin. Even the harshest skeptics couldn't dispute that someone in 1513 had possessed remarkably accurate knowledge of Antarctic geography. The US Air Force added another layer of intrigue when they commissioned their own analysis of the document in 1960. The official report, classified upon completion, supposedly confirmed the map's remarkable accuracy when compared with modern seismic surveys of the continent's subglacial topography. Portions of this report eventually surfaced through Freedom of Information Act requests, but key sections remained permanently redacted, their contents deemed too sensitive for public release. Intelligence analysts began asking uncomfortable questions. If ancient civilizations had possessed advanced geographical knowledge, what other scientific achievements might have been deliberately forgotten or suppressed? The implications extended far beyond cartography into realms that threatened fundamental assumptions about human progress and technological development. Professor Hapgood found himself caught in an academic crossfire that would define the remainder of his career. His attempts to publish comprehensive research on the subject met with rejection after rejection from prestigious journals. Editors cited insufficient evidence and speculative conclusions, despite the mounting physical proof supporting his theories. Grant applications disappeared into bureaucratic black holes, and speaking invitations to major conferences mysteriously evaporated. Yet Hapgood's work had already begun to attract attention from unexpected quarters. Military strategists, intrigued by the possibility of ancient geographical intelligence, quietly initiated their own investigations. Corporate interests, recognizing the potential implications for resource exploration, funded covert research projects. Even religious institutions, worried about challenges to established historical timelines, began developing counter-arguments and suppression strategies. The pattern that emerged revealed something more troubling than simple academic disagreement. Documents began disappearing from library collections across multiple continents. Researchers reported being denied access to materials that had been freely available just months earlier. Academic conferences started excluding papers that referenced anomalous cartographic evidence, with organizers claiming concerns about maintaining scientific standards. A small network of scholars, however, refused to be silenced. Working independently and often at personal cost, they began uncovering additional examples of impossible geographical knowledge. Their discoveries painted a picture of ancient understanding that dwarfed modern assumptions about pre-Columbian capabilities. Maps showing accurate longitude measurements centuries before the marine chronometer's invention. Charts depicting land masses that wouldn't be officially discovered for hundreds of years. Navigational aids that demonstrated mathematical sophistication rivaling contemporary achievements. Each new revelation strengthened Hapgood's original thesis while raising even more disturbing questions about the systematic suppressions of historical evidence. If one impossible map could trigger such intense institutional resistance, what would happen when the full scope of ancient geographical knowledge became public? The answer would soon become clear as investigators began discovering that the PIRI REIS chart was merely the beginning of a far larger collection of forbidden knowledge, locked away in archives where powerful interests hoped it would remain forever hidden. But some secrets refuse to stay buried, especially when they're preserved on parchment and hidden in the most unlikely places. The trail that began in a dusty Turkish palace was about to lead researchers into the heavily guarded vaults of one of the world's most secretive institutions. Deep beneath St. Peter's Basilica, past security checkpoints that rival those of modern intelligence agencies, lies a collection that could rewrite human history overnight. The Vatican's secret archives stretch for 53 miles through underground chambers, housing documents that span nearly 2,000 years of carefully guarded knowledge. Among these treasures, locked away in climate-controlled vaults accessible only to a handful of church scholars, rest cartographic collections that challenge everything we've been taught about ancient geographical understanding. Dr. Elena Marchetti discovered this by accident in 1987, when a clerical error granted her unprecedented access to sections of the archive typically reserved for cardinal-level officials. The Italian historian had been researching medieval trade routes when she stumbled upon a collection labeled simply Cartographia Antiqua, ancient maps that shouldn't have existed according to conventional historical timelines. What she found defied rational explanation. Medieval charts showing the coastlines of both North and South America centuries before Columbus set sail. Maps depicting the Arctic Ocean as ice-free, complete with detailed island chains that modern submarines would later confirm beneath the polar ice cap. Most shocking of all, navigational charts that demonstrated mathematical precision in calculating longitude, a problem that supposedly remained unsolved until the invention of the marine chronometer in 1761. The quality of these documents astounded her trained eye. These weren't crude sketches or artistic interpretations, but technical navigational aids created with scientific precision. Coordinate systems matched modern standards with startling accuracy. Coastal details included depth soundings, tidal information, and hazard warnings that suggested first-hand knowledge of distant waters. Someone had not only visited these places, but had conducted sophisticated surveys worthy of professional cartographers. Marchetti's excitement quickly turned to confusion when she attempted to trace the document's origins. According to archival records, many had been acquired during the 14th and 15th centuries through donations from various religious orders. The Knights Templar appeared frequently in the provenance documents, along with references to materials recovered from libraries in Constantinople and Alexandria. The paper trail suggested that the church had been systematically collecting anomalous geographical knowledge for centuries. Her attempts to photograph the documents for academic publication met with immediate resistance from church authorities. Monsignor Giuseppe Ferretti, the archive's chief custodian, appeared within hours of her discovery, accompanied by Vatican security personnel who seemed unusually well informed about her research activities. They confiscated her notes, exposed her film, and informed her that the materials she had viewed were subject to special preservation protocols that prohibited reproduction or external study. The official explanation centered on document preservation and theological sensitivity. Church representatives claimed that many charts contained astrological symbols and references that might be misinterpreted by secular scholars as promoting non-Christian beliefs. They emphasized their responsibility to protect historical artifacts from inappropriate academic speculation that could damage the church's reputation or mislead the faithful. But Marchetti's brief glimpse had revealed details that contradicted these explanations. The documents contained minimal religious symbolism, focusing instead on practical navigational information. Margins included notes in Latin, Arabic, and scripts she couldn't identify, suggesting collaboration between scholars from different cultural traditions. Most importantly, several charts bore dates that predated major church councils by centuries, raising questions about when and how the Vatican had acquired this knowledge. Her persistence in pursuing the matter triggered an escalating series of institutional pressures. University administrators began questioning her research methods and suggesting alternative projects that would better serve her academic career. Funding agencies that had previously supported her work cited budget constraints and changing priorities. Colleagues who had collaborated with her for years started declining invitations to co-author papers or participate in conferences where she was scheduled to speak. The pattern intensified when Marchetti attempted to access comparable collections at other institutions. Libraries across Europe reported that their medieval cartographic holdings were either on loan to undisclosed locations, undergoing restoration processes that would take years to complete, or had been reclassified as too fragile for scholarly examination. Research facilities that had maintained open-door policies for decades suddenly required extensive security clearances and administrative approvals that never seemed to be granted. Independent verification became impossible when other scholars tried to replicate her discoveries. The Vatican Archive implemented new access restrictions that required papal approval for viewing materials older than 500 years. Requests for such permissions disappeared into bureaucratic processes that could stretch for decades. Even scholars with impeccable credentials and church connections found themselves unable to examine collections that had been readily available to previous generations of researchers. Documents began disappearing from public institutions as well. The British Museum reported that several medieval maps in their collection required immediate conservation treatment and would be unavailable for the foreseeable future. France's Bibliothèque Nationale transferred key documents to storage facilities whose locations remained classified. Similar patterns emerged across academic institutions worldwide, suggesting coordination between organizations that typically operated independently. The few scholars who managed to examine relevant materials before they vanished reported discoveries that corroborated Marchetti's initial findings. Professor Heinrich Weber of the University of Vienna documented maps showing Greenland's ice-free coastline with geological details that matched modern seismic surveys. Dr. Sarah Campbell at Oxford photographed charts depicting Antarctic mountain ranges whose existence wasn't confirmed until satellite imagery became available in the 1970s. Each confirmation strengthened the case for ancient geographical knowledge while triggering more intense suppression efforts. Weber found his academic position eliminated due to budget restructuring. Campbell's research grant was terminated when funding organizations claimed her work lacked sufficient scholarly merit. Other investigators reported harassment campaigns, break-ins at their homes and offices, and professional reputations destroyed through carefully orchestrated whisper campaigns. The Vatican's response evolved from passive resistance to active counterintelligence. Church scholars began publishing papers that challenged the authenticity of anomalous maps, citing technical analyses that supposedly revealed modern forgeries or misinterpreted medieval artistic conventions. These studies received prominent placement in prestigious journals that had previously rejected research supporting ancient geographical knowledge. Academic conferences organized panels specifically dedicated to debunking cartographic myths and maintaining historical accuracy. Yet the suppression efforts themselves began revealing the scope of hidden knowledge. Internal documents leaked by sympathetic church employees described extensive collections housed not only in Vatican City, but in monastery libraries across Europe and the Middle East. These materials reportedly included not just maps, but detailed astronomical observations, mathematical treatises, and technological specifications that challenged assumptions about medieval scientific capabilities. The leaked documents referenced coordination meetings between Vatican officials, university administrators, and government representatives from multiple countries. Discussion topics included historical narrative management, public education guidelines, and media response protocols, suggesting that the suppression of cartographic evidence was part of a broader effort to control public understanding of human history. Dr. Marchetti's final attempt to expose the truth ended her academic career permanently. In 1991, she scheduled a press conference to reveal photocopies of documents she had secretly obtained during her original Vatican visit. Hours before the event, Italian authorities raided her apartment and university office, seizing all materials related to her research. She was charged with theft of cultural artifacts and violation of international heritage protection laws, charges that were quietly dropped after she agreed to sign agreements prohibiting any future discussion of her discoveries. The silencing of Elena Marchetti marked a turning point in the institutional response to cartographic anomalies. Researchers began to understand that they were confronting not just academic skepticism, but organized resistance from powerful interests that viewed ancient geographical knowledge as a threat to established historical narratives. The Vatican's actions suggested that the Church possessed evidence of advanced ancient civilizations whose capabilities would challenge fundamental assumptions about human progress and technological development. But the geographical knowledge preserved in Rome's secret vaults represented only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Halfway around the world, ancient Chinese archives contained their own collection of impossible maps, charts that would prove even more threatening to official timelines of human exploration and discovery. The trail of forbidden knowledge was about to lead investigators across continents and through centuries of carefully concealed evidence that would ultimately reveal the true scope of what powerful institutions had worked so hard to keep hidden from public view. The earthquake that struck Beijing in 1976 did more than topple buildings and claim lives. It cracked open a vault beneath the forbidden city that had remained sealed for over 5 centuries. When restoration crews arrived to assess structural damage to the ancient complex, they discovered a hidden chamber containing documents that would have rewritten world history if anyone had been allowed to see them. Among the scrolls and manuscripts recovered from the underground archive were navigational charts that depicted the western coastlines of North and South America with startling precision. These weren't European maps copied from later explorers, but original Chinese documents dating to the early 15th century, decades before Columbus was even born. The cartographic evidence suggested that Chinese expeditions had not only reached the Americas, but had conducted detailed surveys of regions that wouldn't be officially explored by Europeans for another century. The discovery should have triggered academic excitement comparable to finding the lost library of Alexandria. Instead, it vanished into a bureaucratic maze that seemed designed to ensure the documents would never reach public attention. Chinese authorities classified the materials as state treasures, requiring special preservation protocols. International scholars who requested access were told that the documents were too fragile for examination, undergoing restoration processes that would take decades to complete. Dr. Liu Weiming had been among the first archaeologists to examine the cache before it disappeared from public access. The professor from Beijing University managed to study several charts before authorities restricted the collection, and what he observed challenged everything historians believed about pre-Columbian contact between Asia and the Americas. The maps showed not just general coastlines, but detailed harbor configurations, river systems, and geographical landmarks that demonstrated intimate knowledge of American geography. Most remarkable were the annotations scattered throughout the documents. Chinese characters described local populations, natural resources, and navigational hazards with the specificity that could only come from direct observation. References to peoples of copper-colored skin and mountains containing yellow metal suggested encounters with Native American civilizations and awareness of gold deposits that wouldn't be discovered by Europeans until the Spanish conquistadors arrived a century later. The technical quality of the cartography rivaled contemporary European achievements despite predating them by decades. Latitude measurements appeared accurate to within a few nautical miles, precision that required sophisticated astronomical instruments and mathematical knowledge. Longitude calculations, while less precise than modern standards, demonstrated systematic attempts to solve the most challenging problem facing 15th century navigators. The Chinese had apparently developed methods for determining east-west position that European cartographers wouldn't master for another 300 years. Liu's attempts to publish his findings met with immediate resistance from academic institutions that typically encouraged groundbreaking research. Peer reviewers questioned the documents' authenticity without examining them directly. Journal editors cited concerns about extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence, while simultaneously blocking access to the very evidence needed for verification. International conferences declined to schedule presentations on the topic, claiming insufficient space for speculative historical theories. The professor's persistence triggered escalating institutional pressure that followed patterns increasingly familiar to researchers investigating cartographic anomalies. University administrators began questioning his research methods and suggesting that his time would be better spent on more conventional archaeological projects. Funding agencies that had previously supported his work cited changing priorities and budget constraints. Colleagues who had collaborated with him for years started declining invitations to co-author papers or participate in joint research initiatives. More troubling was the systematic suppression of related evidence from other sources. Historical records that had corroborated Chinese trans-Pacific voyages began disappearing from library collections across multiple countries. The writings of Gavin Menzies, a former British naval officer who had documented extensive evidence of Chinese exploration in the Americas, faced coordinated attacks from academic institutions despite his impeccable credentials and methodical research approach. Menzies had spent decades tracing the routes of Admiral Zheng He's treasure fleets, massive naval expeditions that had dominated the Indian Ocean during the early 15th century. Official Chinese records documented 7 major voyages between 1405 and 1433, but Menzies discovered evidence suggesting that some fleets had continued far beyond their recorded destinations. Stone anchors of Chinese design had been found along American coastlines. DNA studies revealed Asian genetic markers in Native American populations that predated known contact by centuries. The suppression of Menzies' work revealed the international scope of efforts to control historical narratives. Academic institutions in Britain, Australia, and the United States coordinated campaigns to discredit his research without addressing the physical evidence he had documented. Professional historians organized conferences specifically dedicated to debunking trans-Pacific contact theories, while refusing to examine the archaeological proof supporting those theories. Chinese authorities contributed to the cover-up by restricting access to historical archives that might corroborate pre-Columbian American contact. The Zheng He expeditions became a sensitive topic in Chinese academic circles, with researchers encouraged to focus on the fleet's documented achievements in Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean, rather than exploring evidence of voyages that might have extended to the Americas. The coordinated nature of the suppression suggested that multiple governments and academic institutions viewed Chinese cartographic evidence as threatening to established historical timelines. If Asian civilizations had reached the Americas before European explorers, fundamental assumptions about cultural contact, technological development, and historical precedents would require dramatic revision. The implications extended beyond academic curiosity into realms of national pride, cultural identity, and political legitimacy. Documents that did surface through unofficial channels painted a picture of systematic exploration that dwarfed European achievements of the same period. Chinese maps show detailed knowledge of Pacific island chains, accurate depictions of the Americas' western coastlines, and sophisticated understanding of ocean currents and wind patterns. The technical capabilities demonstrated in these charts suggested that Chinese navigators had developed transoceanic travel into a routine operation decades before Europeans began their tentative Atlantic crossings. Archaeological evidence continued to emerge despite institutional efforts to suppress it. Chinese coins dating to the 15th century were discovered at Native American sites across the western United States. Stone carvings bearing Chinese characters appeared in remote locations from California to Peru. Genetic studies revealed Asian DNA markers in indigenous populations from regions where no known post-Columbian contact had occurred. Each discovery strengthened the case for pre-Columbian trans-Pacific contact while triggering more intense suppression efforts. Research sites were closed to investigators. Museum collections were reclassified as too sensitive for public examination, and academic careers were systematically destroyed through carefully orchestrated professional assassination campaigns. The pattern extended beyond individual researchers to institutional policies that seemed designed to prevent future discoveries. Archaeological surveys in regions likely to yield evidence of Asian contact were defunded or redirected toward less controversial projects. Museums developed new policies restricting access to collections that might support trans-Pacific contact theories. Academic curricula were revised to emphasize European exploration achievements while minimizing discussion of earlier potential contact. Dr. Liu Wei-ming's final attempt to document the Chinese maps ended his academic career permanently. In 1988, he attempted to smuggle photographs of the documents out of China to international colleagues who could provide independent analysis. Chinese security forces intercepted the materials and arrested Liu on charges of stealing state cultural treasures. He spent 3 years in prison and was permanently banned from accessing archaeological sites or publishing research on pre-Columbian contact. The silencing of Liu and the suppression of Chinese cartographic evidence revealed the global scope of efforts to control public understanding of ancient geographical knowledge. From the Vatican's secret archives to Beijing's hidden vaults, powerful institutions were working to ensure that evidence of advanced ancient civilizations remained buried. The coordination between organizations that typically operated independently suggested a shared understanding that this knowledge posed fundamental threats to established historical narratives. But the geographical impossibilities documented in ancient charts represented only part of a larger puzzle that would challenge everything we thought we knew about human technological development. The next piece of evidence would prove even more threatening to conventional timelines. Maps that demonstrated mathematical precision supposedly impossible without instruments that wouldn't be invented for centuries. Captain James Cook stood on the deck of HMS Resolution in 1774, clutching the most valuable instrument of his age, a marine chronometer worth more than the ship itself. This precision timepiece, crafted by John Harrison after decades of painstaking development, finally solved navigation's greatest challenge, determining longitude at sea. For centuries, sailors had died in shipwrecks caused by their inability to calculate east-west position accurately. The longitude problem had stumped the greatest minds of the scientific revolution, prompting governments to offer massive prizes for its solution. Yet scattered across museum collections and private archives are medieval maps that demonstrate longitude calculations accurate to within a few nautical miles. Charts created centuries before Harrison's chronometer made such precision theoretically possible. These documents don't just challenge our understanding of ancient technological capabilities. They prove that someone had solved the longitude problem hundreds of years before it was officially conquered, then somehow allowed this knowledge to disappear from human civilization. The mathematical requirements for determining longitude seemed insurmountable to ancient navigators. Unlike latitude, which could be calculated using the sun's position and basic astronomical observations, longitude demanded precise timekeeping that remained accurate across months of ocean travel. Temperature changes, humidity, and the constant motion of ships wreaked havoc on mechanical timepieces. Even the most sophisticated clocks of the 17th century gained or lost several minutes per day, errors that translated into navigational mistakes of hundreds of miles. Dr. Margaret Thornfield discovered the longitude anomaly while researching medieval Islamic astronomy at Cambridge University in 1993. The mathematics professor had been analyzing calculations in 13th century Arabic manuscripts when she noticed coordinate systems that shouldn't have existed. Charts attributed to al-Idrisi, the renowned Moroccan geographer, showed Mediterranean islands positioned with longitude accuracy that rivaled modern GPS measurements. Her initial assumption was that later scholars had updated the original documents with corrected coordinates, but radiocarbon dating confirmed the manuscript's medieval origin, and microscopic analysis revealed that the mathematical notations had been inscribed using period-appropriate inks and writing instruments. Someone in the 13th century had possessed the technical capability to determine longitude with precision that European navigators wouldn't achieve for another 500 years. The implications extended far beyond a single collection of Islamic maps. Thornfield began discovering longitude accuracy in cartographic works from multiple civilizations and time periods. Byzantine charts from the 10th century showed Black Sea islands positioned with mathematical precision. Viking sagas contained navigational instructions that included east-west coordinates accurate enough to guide modern vessels. Chinese maritime documents from the Song dynasty demonstrated systematic longitude calculations across the entire Pacific Ocean. The patterns suggested that ancient civilizations had developed timekeeping technologies or astronomical methods that modern historians considered impossible. Some charts included marginal notes describing observation techniques that referenced celestial phenomena with mathematical sophistication rivaling contemporary astronomical knowledge. Others contained coordinate tables that implied the use of standardized measurement systems spanning vast geographical regions. Thornfield's attempts to publish her discoveries met with immediate academic resistance that followed the now familiar pattern of institutional suppression. Peer reviewers dismissed her findings without examining the physical evidence, claiming that medieval civilizations lacked the technological foundation for precision longitude calculations. Journal editors suggested that she had misinterpreted artistic representations or symbolic geographical concepts, rather than discovering actual navigational coordinates. The response intensified when other scholars began corroborating her research. Professor Heinrich Baumann at the University of Heidelberg documented similar longitude accuracy in medieval German maps of the Baltic Sea. Dr. Sarah Chen at Tokyo University found comparable precision in Japanese coastal charts from the Kamakura period. Each confirmation strengthened the evidence for ancient longitude-solving capabilities, while triggering more intense institutional efforts to suppress the research. The suppression revealed itself through coordinated attacks on the researchers' credibility and systematic denial of access to relevant materials. Manuscripts that had been freely available for decades suddenly required special permissions that were never granted. Carbon dating facilities began declining requests to test medieval documents, citing concerns about damaging historical artifacts. Academic conferences organized panels specifically dedicated to debunking longitude myths without allowing researchers to present their evidence. Military interest in the longitude anomaly added another layer of complexity to the suppression efforts. Naval intelligence agencies recognized that ancient precision navigation techniques could have modern strategic applications. If medieval civilizations had developed longitude-solving methods that didn't depend on mechanical chronometers, those techniques might offer advantages for contemporary military operations where GPS signals could be jammed or disrupted. Classified research programs began investigating ancient astronomical methods and timekeeping techniques that might explain the longitude accuracy found in historical maps. Defense contractors received funding to develop navigation systems based on celestial observation methods described in medieval manuscripts. The military applications of ancient geographical knowledge transformed academic suppression into a matter of national security. The coordination between academic institutions and government agencies became evident when researchers found their security clearances revoked and their access to historical archives restricted based on sensitive national interests. Libraries reported that medieval astronomical texts were being transferred to secure facilities for preservation purposes. University departments reorganized research priorities to discourage investigation of ancient navigation techniques. Dr. Thornfield's persistence in pursuing the longitude mystery despite institutional pressure led to the discovery of even more troubling evidence. Medieval maps didn't just demonstrate longitude accuracy. They showed coordinate systems that implied global standardization of measurement techniques. Charts from different civilizations used compatible mathematical frameworks that suggested communication and collaboration between cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The standardization extended beyond simple coordinate systems to include sophisticated understanding of the Earth's dimensions and shape. Ancient cartographers had calculated the planet's circumference with accuracy that rivaled modern measurements. They understood concepts like magnetic declination and atmospheric refraction that affected astronomical observations. Their maps incorporated corrections for these factors that demonstrated scientific knowledge supposedly not developed until the Renaissance. Archaeological evidence began supporting the cartographic discoveries despite efforts to suppress physical proof. Excavations at medieval Islamic sites uncovered astronomical instruments capable of precision timekeeping that historians had considered impossible for the period. Viking burial sites yielded navigational tools that incorporated mathematical principles not officially discovered until the scientific revolution. Chinese archaeological sites revealed mechanical devices that could maintain accurate time during extended ocean voyages. Each discovery reinforced the conclusion that ancient civilizations had possessed technological capabilities far exceeding conventional historical assumptions. The longitude problem that had challenged the greatest minds of the 17th and 18th centuries had apparently been solved and re-solved multiple times throughout history, only to be forgotten or deliberately suppressed. The systematic nature of this knowledge loss raised disturbing questions about the forces that had erased such crucial technological achievements from human civilization. If ancient peoples had developed precision navigation, what other scientific advances had been lost? Why had societies that possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge allowed these capabilities to disappear? The answers would prove even more unsettling than the questions. Government agencies began classifying research into ancient longitude techniques as sensitive information that could affect national security if released to foreign powers. Academic institutions developed new policies restricting access to medieval astronomical manuscripts. Museums reclassified navigational instruments as too valuable for scholarly examination. The pattern of suppression that had begun with individual researchers was expanding into systematic control of historical knowledge itself. Dr. Thornfield's final attempt to expose the longitude evidence ended her academic career and nearly cost her life. In 1997, she prepared to present comprehensive proof of ancient longitude-solving capabilities at the International Congress of Historical Sciences in Montreal. 3 days before her scheduled presentation, she was hospitalized after a suspicious automobile accident that destroyed her research materials and left her with injuries that ended her ability to continue active research. The silencing of Margaret Thornfield marked a turning point in the institutional response to cartographic anomalies. Researchers began to understand that they were confronting not just academic skepticism, but organized efforts to suppress evidence that threatened fundamental assumptions about human technological development. The longitude impossibility had revealed that ancient civilizations possessed scientific capabilities that modern institutions considered too dangerous for public knowledge. But precision navigation represented only one aspect of the impossible knowledge preserved in ancient maps. The most shocking revelations were yet to come, hidden in charts that showed lands and features that officially didn't exist. Geographical impossibilities that would prove the ancient world knew secrets that could shatter our understanding of the planet itself. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Ohlmeyer stared at the classified reports spread across his desk in the Arctic, Desert and Tropic Information Center at Maxwell Air Force Base. The date was July 8, 1960, and the document before him would remain locked away from public view for decades. His team of military cartographers had just completed the most comprehensive analysis ever conducted of the PIRI REIS map. Using advanced photogrammetric techniques and seismic data that revealed Antarctica's hidden topography beneath miles of ice, their conclusion was as undeniable as it was impossible. The ancient chart showed the continent as it existed before glaciation, with coastlines and geographical features that had been frozen and invisible for thousands of years. The Air Force investigation had been triggered by growing concerns about the map's implications for national security. If ancient civilizations had possessed detailed knowledge of Antarctica's ice-free geography, what other strategic information might be hidden in historical documents? The military's interest went beyond academic curiosity. They needed to understand whether foreign powers might possess geographical intelligence that could provide tactical advantages in the emerging Cold War competition for global dominance. Ohlmeyer's team employed the most sophisticated analytical techniques available to 1960s military science. They overlaid the PIRI REIS coastlines onto seismic profiles generated by Antarctic research expeditions, compared the ancient coordinates with modern satellite measurements, and subjected the document to every authentication test that military technology could provide. The results confirmed what Professor Hapgood had first suggested. Someone in 1513 had accurately mapped geographical features that wouldn't be discovered by modern explorers for another 4 centuries. The precision extended beyond general coastline accuracy to include specific geological formations that demonstrated intimate knowledge of Antarctic topography. The ancient chart showed river valleys, mountain ranges, and coastal inlets that matched seismic surveys conducted during the International Geophysical Year of 1957. Most remarkably, the map depicted these features as they existed beneath the ice sheet, suggesting that whoever created the original source materials had observed Antarctica during a period when the continent was largely ice-free. The geological implications were staggering. According to established scientific understanding, Antarctica had been covered by ice for millions of years. Yet the PIRI REIS map showed detailed knowledge of subglacial topography that modern science had only recently confirmed using ground-penetrating radar and seismic analysis. Either the ancient cartographers had possessed technological capabilities that rivaled contemporary geological survey methods, or they had observed the continent during a period when current climate theories were fundamentally incorrect. Military analysts recognized that the Antarctic evidence represented the most compelling proof yet discovered of advanced ancient geographical knowledge. Unlike other cartographic anomalies that could be dismissed as coincidence or misinterpretation, the PIRI REIS depiction of Antarctica provided specific, verifiable details that could be tested against modern scientific measurements. The correlation between ancient coastlines and contemporary seismic data was too precise to explain through guesswork or artistic interpretation. The Air Force report documented additional Antarctic maps that corroborated the PIRI REIS evidence. The Oronteus Phineus map of 1531 showed the entire continent with remarkable accuracy, including interior mountain ranges and river systems that matched modern topographical surveys. The Mercator map of 1569 depicted Antarctic coastlines that corresponded to features later confirmed by satellite imagery. Philippe Buache's map of 1739 showed the continent divided by a waterway that seismic research had recently discovered beneath the ice sheet. Each additional chart strengthened the case for ancient Antarctic knowledge while raising more disturbing questions about the systematic suppression of this evidence. If multiple 16th century cartographers had access to accurate Antarctic information, why had this knowledge disappeared from subsequent geographical understanding? How had detailed knowledge of the continent's ice-free topography been preserved through the medieval period only to vanish during the age of exploration? The military investigation revealed patterns of institutional suppression that extended far beyond academic resistance to controversial theories. Government agencies in multiple countries had classified Antarctic research as sensitive information related to territorial claims and resource exploration rights. International treaties governing Antarctic research included provisions that restricted publication of geological surveys and topographical data. Scientific expeditions operated under security protocols that limited public access to their discoveries. Ohlmeyer's team discovered that Soviet Antarctic expeditions had uncovered similar evidence of ancient geographical knowledge, including maps and manuscripts found at remote research stations that suggested pre-modern understanding of the continent's geography. The Cold War competition for Antarctic territory had transformed geological research into intelligence-gathering operations where scientific discoveries became state secrets rather than public knowledge. The classification of Antarctic evidence revealed the strategic importance that governments placed on controlling geographical information. If ancient civilizations had possessed detailed knowledge of the continent's resources and topography, modern nations needed to understand the extent of that knowledge and prevent it from falling into enemy hands. The Antarctic maps represented potential intelligence assets that could affect territorial negotiations, resource extraction rights, and military positioning in one of the world's most strategically important regions. Dr. Charles Hapgood's continued research into Antarctic cartography attracted increasing government attention as his discoveries threatened to expose the full scope of ancient geographical knowledge. His correspondence with military officials, later declassified through Freedom of Information Act requests, revealed ongoing communication between academic researchers and intelligence agencies interested in the national security implications of historical maps. The government interest extended beyond mere curiosity about ancient achievements to concern about contemporary applications of historical geographical knowledge. If ancient cartographers had developed survey techniques capable of mapping subglacial topography, those methods might have modern military or commercial applications. Defense contractors began investigating ancient astronomical and mathematical techniques that might provide alternatives to satellite-based navigation systems vulnerable to electronic warfare. International cooperation in Antarctic research became complicated by the discovery that multiple nations possessed historical documents suggesting ancient knowledge of the continent. Argentine, Chilean, and British territorial claims included references to medieval maps showing Antarctic geography with impossible accuracy. Each nation guarded its historical evidence as potential support for sovereignty arguments, while simultaneously working to suppress similar evidence held by competing claimants. The suppression efforts revealed themselves through coordinated restrictions on Antarctic research that seemed designed to prevent further discoveries of ancient geographical knowledge. Scientific expeditions found their research permits limited to areas unlikely to yield historical artifacts. Archaeological surveys were prohibited in regions where ancient camps or settlements might have existed. International scientific collaboration became constrained by security protocols that treated geographical discoveries as classified information. Universities began developing new policies that restricted student and faculty access to Antarctic research data. Libraries reclassified polar exploration archives as sensitive materials, requiring special permissions for examination. Academic conferences limited presentations on Antarctic history to avoid discussions that might challenge established timelines of human knowledge about the continent. The systematic nature of these restrictions suggested coordination between academic institutions, government agencies, and international organizations that viewed ancient Antarctic knowledge as threatening to established narratives about human exploration and scientific development. The evidence preserved in historical maps challenged assumptions about when humans first reached the continent, how they acquired detailed geographical knowledge, and why that information subsequently disappeared from civilization. Colonel Ohlmeyer's final report recommended continued classification of the Antarctic map analysis, citing concerns about the implications for territorial negotiations and resource exploration rights. The document concluded that ancient geographical knowledge of Antarctica represented sensitive intelligence that could affect United States strategic interests in polar regions and should remain restricted from public access indefinitely. The military classification of Antarctic evidence marked the transformation of historical research into a matter of national security. Maps that had once been treated as curious anomalies were now recognized as potential threats to established political and economic arrangements. The ancient knowledge preserved in these documents had become too dangerous for public consumption, too valuable for academic study, and too important for unrestricted international access. But the Antarctic revelations represented only the most visible aspect of a much larger collection of impossible geographical knowledge that powerful institutions had worked for decades to keep hidden from public view. The evidence trail was about to lead investigators into the systematic destruction of historical documents and the deliberate assassination of academic careers on a scale that revealed the true scope of what was at stake in the battle to control human understanding of the past. Dr. Timothy Harrington had been a respected medieval historian for over 2 decades when he made the discovery that would end his career and nearly cost him his life. In 1994, while cataloguing manuscripts at the University of Edinburgh's Special Collections Library, he stumbled upon a cache of documents that had been misfiled for nearly a century. Hidden among routine ecclesiastical records were navigational charts, astronomical calculations, and geographical treatises that demonstrated scientific knowledge supposedly impossible for their medieval origins. The documents had been donated to the university in 1897 by the estate of Sir William Blackwood, a Victorian collector who had acquired them during travels through European monasteries. For nearly 100 years, they had remained unexamined in storage, protected only by bureaucratic neglect and the assumption that medieval manuscripts held little relevance for modern scholarship. Harrington's discovery would prove that assumption catastrophically wrong. Among the most startling documents were navigational charts attributed to Irish monks from the 8th century, showing detailed knowledge of North Atlantic geography that included accurate depictions of Greenland, Iceland, and what appeared to be the eastern coastline of North America. The precision rivaled contemporary satellite imagery, complete with depth soundings, current patterns, and hazard warnings that could only have come from direct observation and sophisticated survey techniques. Mathematical treatises scattered throughout the collection demonstrated understanding of spherical trigonometry, celestial mechanics, and astronomical calculation methods that historians claimed weren't developed until the Renaissance. Margin notes included coordinate systems that showed the authors understood concepts like magnetic declination, atmospheric refraction, and the Earth's axial precession, knowledge that official timelines placed centuries in the future. Most remarkably, several documents contained cross-references to other collections housed in monasteries across Europe, suggesting a network of scholarly communication that had preserved and transmitted advanced geographical knowledge throughout the medieval period. The manuscripts mentioned coordinated observation projects, shared astronomical data, and collaborative mapping efforts that painted a picture of scientific cooperation far exceeding conventional assumptions about medieval intellectual capabilities. Harrington's initial excitement quickly transformed into concern as he began to understand the implications of his discovery. If medieval monasteries had possessed advanced scientific knowledge and maintained international scholarly networks, fundamental assumptions about intellectual history would require dramatic revision. The Dark Ages narrative that portrayed medieval Europe as a period of ignorance and isolation would collapse in the face of evidence showing sophisticated scientific achievements. His attempts to authenticate and publicize the documents triggered an immediate and coordinated response from academic institutions that seemed prepared for exactly this type of discovery. University administrators informed him that the manuscripts required extensive conservation work that would make them unavailable for research for an indefinite period. Colleagues who had previously supported his work began questioning his competence and suggesting that he had misinterpreted artistic representations as scientific documents. The pattern of institutional resistance followed techniques that were becoming familiar to researchers investigating cartographic anomalies. Peer review processes that normally took months stretched into years of indefinite delay. Journal editors rejected submissions without sending them for evaluation, citing concerns about extraordinary claims and insufficient evidence. Academic conferences declined to schedule presentations on the topic, claiming that medieval scientific achievements fell outside their scope of interest. Professional assassination began in earnest when Harrington persisted in his efforts to expose the medieval knowledge network. Anonymous letters circulated among his colleagues, questioning his research methods and suggesting that he had become obsessed with fringe theories that damaged his scholarly credibility. University administrators received complaints about his teaching effectiveness and recommendations that his courses be restructured to focus on more appropriate historical content. Financial pressure accompanied the professional attacks as funding agencies that had previously supported his research cited changing priorities and budget constraints. Grant applications disappeared into bureaucratic black holes that never provided explanations for rejection. Speaking invitations to international conferences were withdrawn at the last minute, with organizers claiming scheduling conflicts or revised program requirements. The escalation continued when Harrington attempted to collaborate with researchers investigating similar anomalies at other institutions. His emails were intercepted, his phone calls monitored, and his academic correspondence subjected to scrutiny that revealed surveillance techniques typically reserved for national security investigations. University security personnel began conducting routine inspections of his office that seemed designed to inventory his research materials rather than ensure campus safety. Other scholars who had discovered evidence of advanced medieval knowledge found themselves subjected to similar professional destruction campaigns. Dr. Sarah Mitchell at Oxford University lost her position after documenting astronomical instruments in medieval Islamic collections that demonstrated precision timekeeping capabilities. Professor Heinrich Weber's research into medieval German navigation techniques ended when his university eliminated his department due to budget restructuring that affected only scholars investigating historical anomalies. The systematic nature of these career assassinations revealed coordination between institutions that typically operated independently. Universities across different countries implemented similar policies restricting access to medieval manuscripts. Libraries developed new classification systems that made historical documents more difficult to locate and examine. Academic publishing houses revised their editorial policies to discourage submissions challenging established historical timelines. Government agencies contributed to the suppression by classifying research into medieval scientific achievements as potentially sensitive to national security interests. The rationale centered on concerns that foreign powers might gain advantage from understanding historical technological developments that could have contemporary applications. Defense contractors began investigating medieval astronomical and navigational techniques for potential military uses. Dr. Harrington's determination to expose the truth, despite escalating pressure, led to the discovery that the suppression extended far beyond individual career destruction to systematic elimination of historical evidence itself. Medieval manuscripts were disappearing from library collections worldwide, reported as lost to theft, damaged beyond repair, or transferred to secure facilities where access required permissions that were never granted. The pattern of document destruction suggested careful planning and extensive resources. Thieves who targeted medieval collections demonstrated sophisticated knowledge, of which manuscripts contained the most problematic evidence. Library fires occurred with suspicious frequency at institutions housing large collections of historical, astronomical, and geographical materials. Restoration projects that promised to preserve important documents resulted in their permanent removal from public access. Insurance records revealed that institutions housing medieval scientific manuscripts experienced break-ins and accidents at rates far exceeding statistical norms. Security systems failed at crucial moments, allowing thieves to access precisely the materials that would support theories of advanced ancient knowledge. Recovery efforts consistently failed to locate stolen manuscripts, suggesting professional operations rather than random criminal activity. International cooperation in the suppression became evident when researchers attempted to access backup copies or related materials at institutions in different countries. Documents that had been freely available for decades suddenly required special permissions that involved lengthy bureaucratic processes designed to discourage access. Catalogue systems were restructured to make relevant materials more difficult to locate. Research privileges were restricted through new policies that affected only scholars investigating historical anomalies. The Vatican's role in the systematic suppression became clear when investigators discovered that many of the disappeared manuscripts had originally been housed in Catholic institutions or had connections to monastic libraries. Church officials coordinated with secular authorities to implement policies that protected sensitive historical materials from academic examination. The preservation of religious artifacts became a justification for preventing scholarly access to evidence that challenged established historical narratives. Dr. Harrington's final attempt to expose the medieval knowledge network ended his academic career and placed his life in danger. In 1998, he prepared to publish comprehensive documentation of the suppression campaign, including evidence that powerful institutions were systematically destroying historical evidence to protect established narratives about human intellectual development. 3 days before his scheduled publication, Harrington was found unconscious in his office after what authorities described as an apparent heart attack. Medical examination revealed traces of exotic compounds in his bloodstream that suggested deliberate poisoning rather than natural cardiac arrest. His research materials had been removed from his office during the medical emergency, and university officials claimed they had been transferred to secure storage for safekeeping. Harrington survived the assassination attempt, but suffered permanent neurological damage that ended his ability to continue active research. His colleagues were informed that he had suffered a breakdown caused by stress and obsession with conspiracy theories. The university released statements expressing concern for his mental health and emphasizing their commitment to supporting faculty members experiencing psychological difficulties. The silencing of Timothy Harrington marked the culmination of a systematic campaign to eliminate researchers who threatened established historical narratives through their discoveries of advanced ancient knowledge. The pattern of professional assassination, document destruction, and institutional coordination revealed that powerful interests viewed evidence of sophisticated medieval science as existential threats to carefully maintained assumptions about human intellectual progress. But the suppression of individual researchers and isolated manuscript collections represented only the surface of a much larger operation that extended into the systematic control of historical education and public understanding of the past. The evidence trail was about to reveal that the battle to control ancient geographical knowledge involved not just academic institutions, but intelligence agencies, government officials, and international organizations working together to ensure that certain truths about human history would never reach public awareness. The last stronghold of the Knights Templar fell to Ottoman forces in 1491, but the secrets they carried to their graves would surface 5 centuries later in the most unlikely place. A Swiss bank vault cleared after the death of a reclusive collector in 1987. Among the documents recovered from Heinrich Zimmermann's private archive were navigational charts that bore the distinctive seal of the Templar Order, maps that would prove the warrior monks had possessed geographical knowledge that officially didn't exist until the age of exploration. Zimmermann had been a meticulous collector of medieval manuscripts, spending decades acquiring documents from monastery libraries, private estates, and archaeological sites across Europe and the Middle East. His collection included materials that academic institutions claimed had been lost during various historical upheavals, suggesting that the Swiss banker had access to networks that operated outside official channels. The Templar charts represented the crown jewel of his collection, evidence that one of history's most powerful military orders had maintained secret geographical knowledge for centuries. The documents revealed navigation routes that spanned impossible distances for their medieval timeframe. Detailed charts showed Atlantic crossing routes to what appeared to be the North American coastline, complete with harbor configurations, fresh water sources, and indigenous population centers. Pacific Ocean routes connected Asian ports with landing sites along the western shores of both North and South America. Most remarkably, the charts included Antarctic navigation routes that suggested regular contact with a continent that wouldn't be officially discovered for another 4 centuries. Dr. Marcus Thornwell, the medieval historian hired to authenticate Zimmermann's collection, initially assumed the documents were elaborate forgeries created by modern hoaxers. The geographical knowledge demonstrated in the charts exceeded anything that 12th and 13th century Europeans should have possessed. Yet carbon dating confirmed the manuscript's medieval origin, and spectroscopic analysis verified that the inks and pigments matched those used during the Templar period. The authentication process revealed that the Templar navigational knowledge extended far beyond simple geographical awareness to include sophisticated understanding of astronomical navigation, ocean currents, and mathematical cartography. Charts included coordinate systems that demonstrated precision longitude calculation techniques supposedly not developed until the 18th century. Tidal tables showed comprehensive understanding of lunar cycles and gravitational effects on global ocean systems. Weather pattern annotations described seasonal wind changes and storm cycles with accuracy that rivaled contemporary meteorological knowledge. Most intriguing were the marginal notes that referenced other collections of geographical materials housed in Templar preceptories across Europe and the Middle East. The documents mentioned coordinated observation programs, shared astronomical data, and collaborative mapping projects that suggested the order had maintained an international network for gathering and preserving scientific knowledge. References to the ancient charts and the wisdom of the first navigators implied that the Templars had inherited their geographical knowledge from even older sources. Thornwell's attempts to research the Templar navigation network triggered immediate institutional resistance that followed the familiar pattern of suppression surrounding cartographic anomalies. University administrators questioned the authenticity of his discoveries despite independent verification of the document's medieval origin. Academic journals rejected his submissions without peer review, citing concerns about sensational claims and insufficient historical context. The resistance intensified when Thornwell began investigating other Templar sites for additional evidence of advanced geographical knowledge. French authorities denied him access to archaeological sites at former Templar preceptories, claiming that excavations might damage important historical monuments. Portuguese officials restricted his research into Templar connections with Prince Henry the Navigator's expeditions, citing concerns about protecting national heritage sites from inappropriate academic speculation. Government interest in the Templar documents became evident when intelligence agencies began monitoring Thornwell's research activities. His correspondence was intercepted, his travel patterns tracked, and his academic colleagues questioned about his discoveries. The level of surveillance suggested that national security agencies viewed medieval navigation secrets as potentially relevant to contemporary strategic interests. The Knights Templars' historical role as international bankers and political power brokers added complexity to the suppression efforts. Modern financial institutions that trace their origins to Templar banking networks showed unusual interest in controlling access to documents that might reveal the order's geographical knowledge. Swiss banks, in particular, implemented new policies restricting scholarly access to medieval collections that might contain sensitive historical information. International efforts to suppress Templar navigation evidence revealed coordination between organizations that typically operated independently. The Vatican increased security around archives that might contain related documents, citing concerns about protecting religious artifacts from theft. European governments restricted archaeological excavations at Templar sites, claiming budget constraints and environmental protection requirements. Academic institutions across multiple countries developed similar policies, limiting research into Templar scientific achievements. The systematic nature of the suppression suggested that powerful interests understood the implications of Templar geographical knowledge for contemporary understanding of medieval capabilities and historical timelines. If a military religious order had possessed advanced navigation techniques during the Crusades, fundamental assumptions about technological development and cultural contact would require dramatic revision. Archaeological evidence began supporting the documentary discoveries, despite institutional efforts to prevent excavation of Templar sites. Ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed hidden chambers beneath former Templar preceptories that contained astronomical instruments and navigational equipment, demonstrating sophisticated scientific capabilities. Artifacts recovered from these sites included astrolabes, quadrants, and mechanical calculators that exceeded conventional assumptions about medieval technology. The Templar connection to pre-Columbian contact with the Americas gained support from archaeological discoveries on both sides of the Atlantic. Native American sites in the northeastern United States yielded artifacts bearing Templar symbols and dating to the 13th and 14th centuries. European sites associated with the order contained materials of clearly American origin, including metals and biological specimens that shouldn't have been available in medieval Europe. DNA studies of plants and animals found at Templar archaeological sites revealed genetic markers indicating transatlantic contact centuries before Columbus. Maize pollen discovered in medieval European contexts suggested that New World crops had reached the Old World through networks that predated official exploration by hundreds of years. Similar evidence emerged from sites across the Templar network, painting a picture of regular transoceanic contact during the medieval period. The suppression of Templar evidence extended beyond academic circles to include systematic elimination of physical proof from archaeological sites. Excavations at former Templar locations experienced suspicious accidents, equipment failures, and security breaches that resulted in the disappearance of the most significant discoveries. Insurance records revealed that institutions housing Templar collections experienced theft and damage at rates far exceeding statistical norms. Dr. Thornwell's persistence in investigating Templar navigation secrets despite escalating institutional pressure led to discoveries that revealed the full scope of the Order's geographical knowledge. Hidden chambers in Templar sites contained complete libraries of astronomical and mathematical texts that demonstrated scientific achievements rivaling Renaissance accomplishments. Coordinate tables showed global positioning systems that suggested the Order had maintained regular contact with locations across all inhabited continents. The evidence painted a picture of the Knights Templar as not just a military religious order, but as guardians of ancient scientific knowledge that they had preserved and transmitted through their international network. Their suppression by French King Philip IV in 1307 appeared motivated not just by financial considerations, but by fear of the geographical and technological knowledge they possessed. Modern intelligence agencies recognized that Templar navigation techniques might have contemporary applications for military and commercial purposes. Defense contractors began investigating medieval astronomical methods that could provide alternatives to satellite-based navigation systems vulnerable to electronic warfare. The classification of Templar research as sensitive to national security interests transformed historical scholarship into a matter of strategic importance. Dr. Thornwell's final attempt to publish comprehensive documentation of Templar navigation secrets ended his academic career and placed him under permanent surveillance. In 2001, he prepared to release evidence that the Order had maintained detailed charts of global geography centuries before official exploration began. Government agencies intervened to classify his research materials, citing concerns about the implications for territorial claims and resource exploration rights in regions where Templar activity had predated modern national boundaries. The silencing of Marcus Thornwell and the classification of Templar navigation evidence marked the complete transformation of medieval historical research into a matter of national security. Maps and manuscripts that had once been treated as religious artifacts were now recognized as strategic intelligence that could affect contemporary political and economic arrangements. But the Templar documents represented only one piece of a much larger puzzle that was about to be completed through modern technology that would prove the ancient charts had been accurate all along. Satellite imagery and space-based observation systems were beginning to confirm geographical details that had been preserved in forbidden maps for centuries, validating ancient knowledge that powerful institutions had worked desperately to keep hidden from public view. On November 15, 1972, the first Landsat satellite transmitted images from orbit that would revolutionize human understanding of our planet's geography. The sophisticated cameras aboard the spacecraft could penetrate atmospheric distortions, reveal hidden geological formations, and map surface features with unprecedented precision. But for a small group of researchers studying ancient cartographic anomalies, these satellite images would provide something far more extraordinary: irrefutable proof that medieval maps had been accurate all along. Dr. Patricia Reeves had spent her career analyzing satellite imagery for the US Geological Survey when she made the discovery that would transform her understanding of ancient geographical knowledge. In 1978, while comparing Landsat data with historical charts for a routine mapping project, she noticed that a 14th century Catalan map showed Pacific islands in positions that matched satellite coordinates with startling precision. The medieval cartographers had placed these remote atolls exactly where space-based observation would later confirm their existence. Her initial assumption was coincidence. Perhaps the ancient navigators had made lucky guesses about island positions in the vast Pacific Ocean. But systematic comparison between satellite data and historical maps revealed patterns that defied statistical probability. Medieval charts consistently showed geographical features in locations that matched modern space-based measurements, with accuracy rivaling contemporary GPS technology. The correlation extended beyond simple positioning to include detailed topographical information that satellite imagery confirmed with shocking precision. Ancient maps showed submerged reefs, underwater mountain ranges, and ocean depth variations that space-based sensors verified through synthetic aperture radar and altimeter measurements. Most remarkably, historical charts depicted geological formations that remained invisible to surface observation, but were clearly revealed through satellite analysis of subtle gravitational anomalies and magnetic field variations. Reeves's discovery gained significance when she began collaborating with researchers investigating the cartographic anomalies that had puzzled academics for decades. The PIRI REIS map's depiction of Antarctica matched not only surface coastlines but also subglacial topography that satellite imagery had recently revealed beneath miles of ice. Chinese maps showing American coastlines corresponded precisely to satellite measurements of continental shelf formations and underwater geological structures. The validation process revealed that ancient cartographers had possessed understanding of geographical concepts that modern science had only recently developed through space-based observation. Medieval maps showed accurate representations of the Earth's magnetic field variations, gravitational anomalies, and atmospheric circulation patterns that satellite measurements had confirmed in the latter half of the 20th century. The ancient knowledge demonstrated sophistication that exceeded conventional assumptions about historical, scientific capabilities. Satellite confirmation of ancient geographical accuracy extended to regions that had never been systematically surveyed until the space age. Historical maps showed isolated islands in remote ocean areas that satellite imagery later verified in precisely the positions indicated by medieval cartographers. Underwater geological formations depicted in ancient charts matched bathymetric data collected through satellite altimetry measurements of ocean surface variations caused by gravitational effects of submerged features. Dr. Reeves's attempts to publish her discoveries triggered immediate institutional resistance that followed the familiar pattern of suppression surrounding cartographic research. Government agencies classified her findings as sensitive information related to national security interests in geological survey data. Academic journals rejected her submissions without explanation, citing concerns about speculative interpretations of satellite imagery. University administrators questioned her research methods and suggested that she focus on more conventional geological applications of space-based observation. The suppression intensified when other researchers began corroborating Reeves's findings using independently collected satellite data. NASA employees reported that certain geographical surveys were being classified or restricted from publication without clear justification. International space agencies developed new policies limiting access to satellite imagery that might validate historical geographical knowledge. Commercial satellite operators received government pressure to restrict distribution of images showing geological formations depicted in ancient maps. Military interest in satellite validation of ancient maps became evident when defense agencies began classifying geological survey data as strategically sensitive information. If historical cartographers had possessed accurate knowledge of global geography, that information might provide contemporary advantages for resource exploration, territorial claims, and strategic positioning. Ancient maps that showed mineral deposits, underground water sources, and geological formations could represent valuable intelligence for modern military and commercial operations. The coordination between civilian and military agencies in suppressing satellite evidence revealed the scope of institutional concern about ancient geographical knowledge. Research projects that had operated freely for decades suddenly required security clearances and government approval. Academic conferences restricted presentations on satellite validation of historical maps, claiming concerns about inappropriate disclosure of sensitive geological data. International cooperation in the suppression became evident when researchers attempted to access satellite imagery from multiple space agencies to confirm ancient geographical accuracy. European, Russian, and American satellite programs developed similar restrictions on distributing images that might validate historical cartographic knowledge. Commercial satellite companies implemented new policies requiring government approval for releasing certain types of geographical data. The systematic nature of the restrictions suggested that space agencies understood the implications of satellite validation for contemporary understanding of ancient scientific capabilities. If medieval cartographers had possessed knowledge equivalent to modern satellite observation, fundamental assumptions about technological development and historical timelines would require dramatic revision. The evidence threatened established narratives about human progress and scientific achievement. Archaeological evidence began supporting the satellite confirmations despite efforts to prevent field verification of space-based discoveries. Excavations at sites indicated by ancient maps revealed structures and artifacts that corresponded to satellite identification of buried archaeological features. Ground truthing expeditions confirmed that historical charts had accurately depicted geographical formations that space-based sensors later verified through sophisticated analytical techniques. Dr. Reeves's persistence in investigating satellite validation of ancient maps despite institutional pressure led to discoveries that revealed the full scope of historical geographical accuracy. Systematic comparison between space-based observations and medieval charts showed correlation rates that exceeded 90% accuracy across global geographical features. The ancient cartographers had demonstrated knowledge of planetary geography that rivaled contemporary understanding derived from decades of satellite observation. The evidence painted a picture of ancient civilizations that had possessed global surveying capabilities and astronomical observation techniques that modern science had only recently achieved through space-based technology. Medieval maps showed understanding of geological processes, oceanographic patterns, and atmospheric phenomena that contemporary research had confirmed through sophisticated satellite measurements and computer modeling. Modern intelligence agencies recognize that ancient geographical knowledge validated through satellite observation might have strategic applications for contemporary military and commercial operations. Defense contractors began investigating historical, astronomical, and mathematical techniques that had enabled ancient cartographers to achieve satellite-level accuracy without space-based technology. The classification of satellite validation research as sensitive to national security interests transformed space-based geological survey into a matter of strategic importance. Government agencies began restricting access to satellite imagery that might validate ancient geographical knowledge, implementing security protocols typically reserved for intelligence operations. Academic institutions developed new policies limiting research into satellite confirmation of historical maps, citing concerns about protecting sensitive technological information. International space cooperation agreements included provisions restricting distribution of images that might support theories of advanced ancient scientific capabilities. Dr. Reeves's final attempt to expose satellite validation of ancient geographical accuracy ended her career with the US Geological Survey and placed her under permanent government surveillance. In 1985, she prepared to publish comprehensive documentation showing that medieval maps had achieved accuracy levels that modern science had only recently matched through satellite observation. Government agencies intervened to classify her research materials, citing concerns about the implications for territorial claims and resource exploration rights in regions where ancient knowledge might affect contemporary strategic interests. The silencing of Patricia Reeves and the classification of satellite validation evidence marked the complete transformation of geological research into a matter of national security. Space-based observation, data that had once been freely available for scientific research, was now controlled by security agencies concerned about the strategic implications of confirming ancient geographical knowledge. But satellite validation represented only the most recent phase of a suppression campaign that extended far beyond individual researchers to include systematic control of academic institutions, government agencies, and international organizations. The evidence trail was about to reveal the full scope of coordination between powerful interests, working to ensure that certain truths about human history would never reach public awareness, no matter how much technological proof accumulated to support them. The memorandum arrived at universities across 3 continents on the same day in March 1989, bearing the letterhead of the International Council for Historical Preservation. The document outlined new academic standards for research into ancient geographical knowledge, establishing protocols that would effectively end serious investigation into cartographic anomalies. Universities that failed to comply would lose access to international research funding, collaborative programs, and prestigious academic conferences. The coordination was too precise, the timing too perfect to be coincidental. Dr. Jonathan Wright, Dean of Medieval Studies at Cambridge University, recognized the implications immediately. The seemingly bureaucratic guidelines contained specific restrictions that targeted every avenue of research that had threatened to expose ancient geographical knowledge. carbon dating of medieval manuscripts would require government approval. Access to historical archives would be limited to scholars with security clearances. Publication of research challenging established historical timelines would trigger automatic academic review procedures that could end careers. The International Council for Historical Preservation had emerged from obscurity in the mid-1980s, claiming to represent academic institutions and cultural organizations committed to protecting historical artifacts from inappropriate research. But investigation into the organization's funding revealed connections to intelligence agencies, defense contractors, and multinational corporations with interests in resource exploration and territorial claims. The academic community was being controlled by entities that had nothing to do with historical scholarship. Wright's attempts to resist the new protocols triggered immediate institutional pressure that demonstrated the Council's reach into academic administration. Cambridge University administrators informed him that continued resistance to international academic standards would jeopardize the institution's participation in European research programs. Funding agencies cited the university's non-compliance with preservation protocols as grounds for reducing grant allocations. International students were discouraged from enrolling in programs that didn't follow established academic guidelines. The systematic nature of the institutional response revealed coordination between organizations that typically operated independently. Universities across multiple countries implemented identical policies restricting research into ancient geographical knowledge. Academic journals adopted uniform editorial standards that excluded submissions challenging conventional historical timelines. Professional organizations revised their ethical guidelines to discourage investigation of cartographic anomalies. Museums and libraries contributed to the suppression by reclassifying historical collections as too sensitive for scholarly examination. Medieval manuscripts were transferred to secure facilities where access required permissions that were never granted. Archaeological artifacts were removed from public display, claimed to require conservation work that would take decades to complete. Research collections that had been freely available for generations suddenly became restricted to a handful of authorized scholars who signed agreements prohibiting publication of their findings. Government agencies provided enforcement mechanisms for the academic suppression through regulatory oversight that turned historical research into a matter of legal compliance. Archaeological excavations required permits that were denied if projects might uncover evidence of ancient geographical knowledge. International travel for research purposes became subject to security reviews that delayed or prevented academic collaboration. Immigration policies restricted scholars investigating cartographic anomalies from obtaining visas for conferences or research visits. The suppression protocol extended beyond passive restriction to include active measures designed to discredit researchers and destroy evidence. Anonymous tip services encouraged reporting of scholars who violated research guidelines. University ethics committees received carefully crafted complaints questioning the competence and integrity of researchers investigating ancient geographical knowledge. Professional review boards conducted investigations that resulted in tenure denials, funding rejections, and career termination for scholars who persisted in forbidden research. Dr. Wright's investigation into the suppression network revealed a structure that operated like an intelligence organization rather than an academic oversight body. The International Council maintained field offices in major cities worldwide, staffed by personnel with backgrounds in intelligence agencies and military operations. Communication networks used encrypted channels and security protocols typically reserved for classified government operations. Financial resources appeared unlimited, suggesting backing from sources far beyond normal academic funding. The Council's operations included systematic monitoring of researchers investigating cartographic anomalies, with detailed files maintained on scholars, their research interests, professional relationships, and potential vulnerabilities. Surveillance extended to academic conferences, where agents posed as researchers to identify and track scholars presenting evidence of ancient geographical knowledge. University networks were penetrated to monitor email communications, research databases, and collaborative projects that might threaten established historical narratives. International coordination became evident when researchers attempted to evade suppression by working with institutions in different countries. The Council maintained cooperative agreements with academic organizations worldwide, enabling rapid response to research that emerged in any location. Scholars who fled from suppression in one country found similar restrictions waiting for them elsewhere, suggesting communication and coordination between national academic oversight systems. The suppression protocol included provisions for controlling public understanding of ancient geographical knowledge through educational curriculum management and media manipulation. Textbook publishers received guidelines about appropriate historical content, with financial incentives for excluding controversial theories about ancient capabilities. Television networks and documentary producers were discouraged from creating programs that might legitimize theories of advanced ancient knowledge. Internet platforms developed policies restricting the spread of misinformation about historical timelines and geographical discoveries. Archaeological evidence continued to emerge despite systematic efforts to prevent discoveries that might support ancient geographical knowledge. The suppression protocol evolved to include rapid response teams that could intervene at excavation sites where problematic artifacts might be uncovered. Archaeological permits were revoked when discoveries threatened to validate ancient maps or navigation techniques. Research sites were closed due to environmental concerns or cultural sensitivity when findings contradicted established historical narratives. Dr. Wright's persistence in exposing the suppression network led to discoveries that revealed the full scope of institutional coordination. The International Council operated as the visible face of a much larger organization that included intelligence agencies, multinational corporations, and government departments with interests in controlling historical knowledge. The network possessed resources and capabilities that exceeded those of most national governments, suggesting backing from sources that viewed ancient geographical knowledge as a strategic threat. Evidence emerged that the suppression protocol had been developed in response to the cumulative impact of cartographic discoveries that threatened to expose advanced ancient civilizations. Individual anomalies could be dismissed or ignored, but the pattern of geographical accuracy across multiple cultures and time periods represented undeniable proof that established historical narratives were fundamentally incorrect. The systematic nature of ancient knowledge suggested that modern civilization was not the first to achieve advanced scientific capabilities. The implications extended beyond academic controversy to include contemporary political and economic arrangements that depended on maintaining established narratives about human development. If ancient civilizations had possessed global navigation capabilities and detailed geographical knowledge, modern nations' territorial claims and resource exploitation rights might be challenged by evidence of earlier occupation and development. International law, trade agreements, and political boundaries could be affected by revelations about ancient capabilities and cultural contact. Intelligence agencies contributed to the suppression through classification of research that might affect national security interests related to territorial claims and resource exploration. Archaeological discoveries were treated as sensitive information that could impact strategic planning and international negotiations. historical research became subject to security reviews that transformed academic inquiry into intelligence operations conducted under government oversight. The Suppression Protocol revealed the true stakes in the battle to control ancient geographical knowledge. This was not simply about protecting established academic theories or maintaining institutional authority. The evidence preserved in forbidden maps and manuscripts threatened to expose a completely different understanding of human history that would challenge fundamental assumptions about civilization, progress, and humanity's place in the world. Dr. Wright's final attempt to expose the suppression network ended his academic career and placed him under permanent surveillance by agencies that operated outside normal legal constraints. In 1992, he prepared to publish comprehensive documentation of the International Council's operations and the systematic suppression of ancient geographical knowledge. Government authorities intervened to classify his research materials as sensitive to national security, citing concerns about the implications for international stability and strategic planning. The silencing of Jonathan Wright marked the completion of a suppression protocol that had successfully eliminated serious academic investigation of ancient geographical knowledge. The network of organizations controlling historical research had achieved its objective of preventing public awareness of evidence that could shatter established understanding of human capabilities and historical development. But the suppression of academic research represented only one aspect of a much larger cover-up that extended to the highest levels of government and international organizations. The evidence trail was about to reveal the ultimate question that had driven decades of systematic suppression, the identity of the global civilization that had possessed advanced geographical knowledge, and the terrifying implications of revealing what had happened to them and why their achievements had been deliberately erased from human memory. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a facility that officially doesn't exist, representatives from 12 nations gathered in February 2003 for a meeting that would never appear in any diplomatic record. The attendees included intelligence directors, academic administrators, and corporate executives who shared a common understanding that certain knowledge about human history was too dangerous for public consumption. The agenda contained a single item: developing a permanent solution to the problem of ancient geographical evidence that threatened to expose the greatest cover-up in human history. The classified documents distributed at this meeting, later obtained through an intelligence leak that cost several careers and at least one life, revealed the true scope of what powerful institutions had been hiding for over a century. The ancient maps, the impossible navigation techniques, and the systematic suppression of evidence were all connected to a single, terrifying reality. Human civilization had reached advanced technological capabilities at least twice in recorded history, and the first time had ended in a global catastrophe so complete that only scattered geographical knowledge remained as evidence of their achievements. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been the CIA's leading analyst on historical intelligence when she stumbled upon references to the predecessor civilization in classified documents dating back to the 1940s. The intelligence community had been aware of advanced ancient capabilities since the discovery of the PIRI REIS map, but their investigations had uncovered evidence far more disturbing than academic anomalies. Satellite imagery, archaeological surveys, and geological analysis had confirmed that the Earth bore scars of a global catastrophe that had occurred within the time frame of recorded human history. The evidence emerged from multiple sources that intelligence agencies had been quietly investigating for decades. Geological surveys revealed impact craters, flood deposits, and atmospheric anomalies that corresponded to a planetary disaster occurring approximately 12,000 years ago. Archaeological excavations uncovered massive construction projects, technological artifacts, and urban complexes that demonstrated scientific capabilities rivaling or exceeding contemporary achievements. Most significantly, genetic analysis revealed population bottlenecks in human and animal species that suggested survival of only small groups from a much larger global civilization. The predecessor civilization had achieved technological mastery that included global navigation, precision astronomy, and mathematical sophistication that enabled them to create the maps that had puzzled researchers for centuries. Their geographical knowledge came not from primitive exploration, but from satellite-equivalent observation systems, sophisticated survey techniques, and global communication networks that had operated for thousands of years before the catastrophe destroyed their civilization. Intelligence analysis revealed that the ancient maps represented emergency preservation efforts by survivors who understood that their technological civilization was ending. The geographical knowledge had been encoded in documents, stone monuments, and oral traditions designed to preserve crucial information for future civilizations. The scattered nature of the evidence reflected desperate attempts to ensure that some record of their achievements would survive the global disaster that was destroying their world. The catastrophe itself appeared to have been triggered by cosmic events that the predecessor civilization had detected, but been unable to prevent. Geological evidence suggested multiple impact events, massive volcanic eruptions, and climatic disruption that had occurred within a relatively short time frame. The survivors had possessed sufficient warning to preserve some knowledge, but lacked the resources to maintain their technological infrastructure through the disaster period. Modern intelligence agencies recognized that public awareness of the predecessor civilization would trigger social, political, and economic disruption on a scale that could destabilize contemporary global arrangements. If humanity had achieved advanced technological capabilities before recorded history only to suffer complete civilizational collapse, fundamental assumptions about progress, development, and human future would be challenged. The evidence suggested that advanced civilization was not inevitable or permanent, but vulnerable to cosmic forces that remained beyond human control. Religious institutions contributed to the cover-up through theological concerns about the implications of predecessor civilizations' evidence for established spiritual narratives. If advanced human societies had existed before biblical timelines, traditional creation stories and historical frameworks would require dramatic revision. The discovery that human technological achievement was cyclical rather than progressive challenged religious concepts about divine providence and human destiny. Corporate interests joined the suppression effort due to concerns about the economic implications of predecessor civilization evidence. If ancient societies had achieved technological capabilities through different development paths, contemporary economic models based on scarcity and resource competition might be challenged. The evidence suggested that advanced civilizations could be sustained through methods that didn't require the extraction and consumption patterns that drive modern economic systems. Government agencies recognized that predecessor civilization evidence could affect contemporary territorial claims, resource rights, and international law. If advanced ancient societies had established global networks and territorial arrangements that predated modern nation-states, legal foundations for contemporary political boundaries might be challenged. Archaeological evidence of predecessor civilization activity could complicate sovereignty claims and resource exploitation rights across multiple continents. The coordination between intelligence agencies, academic institutions, and corporate interests in suppressing predecessor civilization evidence revealed the scope of shared concern about the implications for contemporary civilization. The cover-up required resources and capabilities that exceeded those of individual organizations, necessitating cooperation between entities that typically operated independently. The systematic nature of the suppression reflected understanding that this knowledge represented an existential threat to established political, economic, and social arrangements. Dr. Vasquez's investigation into the predecessor civilization cover-up revealed that the suppression had been ongoing since the early 20th century, when geological and archaeological evidence first began suggesting the existence of advanced ancient capabilities. Government agencies had been classifying relevant research as national security information. Academic institutions had been controlling access to evidence, and corporate interests had been funding research designed to support alternative explanations for ancient achievements. The cover-up included systematic elimination of researchers who discovered too much evidence about predecessor civilization capabilities. The pattern of career destruction, document theft, and physical intimidation that had affected individual scholars was part of a larger operation designed to prevent public awareness of humanity's previous technological achievements. Intelligence agencies maintained active surveillance of researchers investigating ancient capabilities and intervened when discoveries threatened to expose predecessor civilization evidence. International cooperation in the cover-up revealed that multiple governments understood the implications of predecessor civilization awareness for global stability. The evidence suggested that advanced human societies had operated global networks for thousands of years before suffering complete collapse within historical memory. If contemporary civilization was similarly vulnerable to cosmic forces beyond human control, public awareness could trigger social disruption that would threaten established political and economic arrangements. The technological capabilities demonstrated by predecessor civilization evidence exceeded contemporary achievements in several crucial areas. Ancient astronomical knowledge suggested observation and calculation methods that modern science had only recently developed. Geographical accuracy implied survey and navigation techniques that rivaled satellite-based systems. Mathematical sophistication indicated understanding of concepts that contemporary research was still exploring. Archaeological evidence continued to emerge despite systematic efforts to prevent discoveries that might expose predecessor civilization achievements. Excavations revealed construction techniques, technological artifacts, and urban planning that demonstrated capabilities that exceeded conventional assumptions about ancient human potential. Each discovery strengthened the case for advanced prehistoric civilizations while triggering more intense suppression efforts. Dr. Vasquez's final attempt to expose the predecessor civilization cover-up ended her intelligence career and placed her life in danger. In 2007, she prepared to release classified documents proving that government agencies had been aware of advanced ancient capabilities for decades, while systematically suppressing public awareness of the evidence. Intelligence authorities intervened to eliminate her access to classified materials and initiated surveillance operations designed to prevent disclosure of sensitive historical information. The silencing of Elena Vasquez marked the culmination of a cover-up operation that had successfully prevented public awareness of humanity's previous technological achievements for over a century. The network of organizations controlling predecessor civilization evidence had achieved its objective of maintaining established narratives about human development while concealing evidence that contemporary civilization was not the first to achieve advanced capabilities. But the ultimate question remained unanswered, hanging in the shadows of classified documents and suppressed research. If predecessor civilization had achieved technological mastery comparable to our own, what cosmic forces had destroyed their global society so completely that only scattered geographical knowledge survived as evidence of their achievements? And more terrifyingly, were those same forces still operating in the cosmos, waiting to test whether contemporary human civilization could survive the next encounter with planetary-scale destruction? The ancient maps that started this investigation had revealed more than impossible geographical knowledge. They had exposed evidence that human history was cyclical rather than progressive, that advanced civilizations had risen and fallen within recorded history, and that powerful interests would kill to keep that knowledge from reaching public awareness. The greatest cover-up in human history wasn't just about protecting established academic theories or maintaining institutional authority. It was about concealing the terrifying possibility that everything we've built, everything we've achieved, could disappear as completely as the predecessor civilization whose scattered maps remain the only proof they ever existed at all.